If you are considering buying a house in Spain, you may be wondering about taxes and what that means for you as a homeowner at the time of purchase, on an annual basis, what your taxes are if you rent out the property, and taxes if you ever sell the home. Today, I'm going to break that down for you, keeping it simple so you can be prepared when you find the home that's right for you. And I've also got news on an update in 2024 that makes it easier for non-residents who have to pay taxes on rental income. Hi, my name is Nicole. Welcome to my channel, Travel to Money. As we get started, just a friendly reminder that I am not a tax professional, and this information is for entertainment purposes only. You should always consult a professional and do your own research. When you're looking to buy a home in a country that is not your homeland, sometimes terms can feel confusing and overwhelming, but rest assured, property taxes in Spain are not overly complicated. I've purchased 3 homes in Spain, sold 2 of them, and honestly, until this year, I didn't even fully understand the tax systems for homeowners. My attorney and accountant in Spain would let me know what was due and when, and it's always been so simple that I didn't really look into the details. But because of wanting to be a really great resource for you, I wanted to break down each tax to help you understand it. At the end, I'll summarize everything so that you can see just how simple it is. If you want someone to work with you through all the details of how to buy a house in Spain, I also offer coaching at traveltomoney.com/coaching, and I'd love to meet with you in a one-on-one session. I recently sat down with a longtime accountant in my small town of Pago to get the overview in his words. It was actually pretty interesting to sit down with him. He was an incredibly well-dressed older gentleman, and when we sat down, I pulled out my pen and paper and began to take notes. In true Spanish fashion, he asked me not to take notes because he just wanted us to have a conversation. It's that relational nature. Fortunately for me, it wasn't that complicated, and I was able to jot down my notes quickly afterward. Okay, let's start with the tax you pay when you purchase a house. There is a 10% tax on the purchase price of the property. If you buy a house for 50,000, you pay a 5,000 euro tax. If you buy a house for 100,000, you pay a 10,000 euro tax. The only time I've seen anything different than that was on my most recent purchase. And that is because there was a minimum value assigned to the house that was higher than what I was purchasing it for. This isn't super common, but it is something that could come up in the process. In any case, you should plan for 10% of the purchase price, but if you're buying something really cheap or that was listed far under value, you may want to plan for a larger tax amount in case the minimum value assigned by the government is higher than the purchase price. By the way, you may not know this right away. This will be something your attorney will find out in the process of doing the property research for you. Okay, so now you own the home. What taxes are you responsible for on an ongoing basis? We're going to break this down into a few different areas. The first 2 are ongoing for everyone. Let's start with the IBI, which I've also heard pronounced the IBI, stands for Impuesto sobre Bienes Inmuebles. I haven't got to this part on Duolingo yet, so forgive me if I said that wrong. This just basically means your yearly property tax. You don't have to have an accountant file this. It's easiest just to have your attorney set it up to directly debit from your bank account in Spain. I'm usually informed of my amount due via email every August, and they let me know the date when it will be debited from my bank account. Mine is usually taken out every October. This will vary depending on the region, but usually between August and October. It is a local tax determined by the cadastral value of the house. This is generally 30 to 40% lower than the market value of the house. Then, based on the region, the tax amount is a percentage somewhere between 0.4% and 1.3% of the cadastral value of the house. So for easy math, if you owned a house that had a market value of $100,000, the cadastral value of the house would likely be between $60,000 and $70,000. So on the low end, paying 0.4% of $60,000 would be 240 euro per year. On the high end, 1.3% of $70,000 would be 910 euro per year. Because the value of the homes I've purchased is on the lower end, my yearly payments have always been less than 200 euro per year. So this is the property tax you pay annually, no matter if you are a resident or not. The next tax that is paid by every homeowner is referred to as excesiones municipales, which is directly translated to English as municipal levies, or the basura, which translates to garbage. However, you'll hear most English expats in Spain refer to it as rubbish tax. Unlike in the US, where you have a garbage can that you put out for collection at the end of your driveway, in Spain it is common to have trash and recycling at the end of many streets. You carry your trash there and it is collected regularly. The rubbish tax is determined by the local government and usually falls between 80 and 170 euro per year, depending on the area of Spain you live in. These are usually collected between April and May each year and is also something you can have set up as a direct debit from your bank account. I'm now going to touch on other taxes that are dependent on your situation. The first one is an income tax that is collected as a non-resident of Spain for income made on your property. It's important to know that this has to be filed even if you don't rent out your house. It's called a non-resident tax. So let's talk about both scenarios. First, let's cover the scenario where you don't actually earn any rental income on your property. There is a Form 210 that has to be filled out annually. To my knowledge, you can do this yourself, but I have an accountant do this for me each year, and I pay them about 90 euro each time to complete this and submit the payment for me. When you don't rent the property out, you are paying between 1 and 2% of that cadastral value that we mentioned before. For my homes, I have usually paid between 75 and 185 euro each year. Again, it depends on the value of your property. To use the 100,000 euro property example again, if you were paying between 1 and 2% on the cadastral value, which would likely be between 60 and 70,000 euro, you're looking at $600 per year on the low end and 1,400 euros per year on the high end. So what determines if you pay 1% or 2%? Well, if the cadastral value of the house has been updated within the last 10 years, then the amount is 1.1%. If the value of the house has not been updated within the last 10 years, then the amount you pay is 2%. So we just talked about the non-resident tax you pay if you're not renting out your property. For those of you who are renting out your property, this same Form 210 is the one that is submitted. Remember at the beginning of this video, I said there was good news for those who rent out your properties? Well, previously, if you earned rental income, you had to submit one of these 210 forms and your payment every quarter. But from what I've read, this year that changed, and now your rental income only needs to be submitted once per year. Personally, I find that to be a big win if you are into property rentals. Okay, but how much do you pay on rental income? For non-residents of the EU, you pay a tax of 24% of your rental income. Now, if you're thinking you'll have a list of deductions to make that tax amount smaller, don't get too excited. To my knowledge, you're not allowed to deduct anything. You pay the 24% flat, and if you're planning on managing a rental property, you need to factor that into your numbers to make sure it makes sense. Now, if you are a non-resident of Spain, but you are from another EU country, your tax amount is reduced to 19% instead of 24, which is not nothing. If you earned 20,000 euros in a year, the EU non-resident would keep an extra $1,000 in their pocket over the non-resident from outside the EU. These taxes are due to be filed and paid by the end of the following year. So your 210 form needs to be filed and paid by the end of 2025 for your non-resident tax or your rental income tax in 2024. Okay, now that we understand non-resident taxes, I want to briefly mention the wealth tax, and I'm not going to go into it much because it won't pertain to most of you watching. For those who own a considerable amount of assets in Spain, which can include things like properties you own and money you have in your bank accounts in Spain, to total more than 3 million euros in value, you would be responsible for a wealth tax. I haven't studied the details, but I would encourage you to contact a Spanish accountant if you need to consider the implications of a wealth tax for yourself. Okay, the other tax that is dependent on your situation would be a road tax, which is something you only pay if you own a car. This tax is determined by your local municipality and is based on the type of vehicle you drive. I pay about €150 per year. Now, the last tax I'm going to cover today is the tax you pay if you sell your property in Spain. You're probably familiar with the term capital gains tax. So, for example, if I buy a house for €50,000 and then I sell that house for €70,000, my profit or capital gains is €20,000. So, in Spain, as a non resident of the EU, you will pay a capital gains tax of 24%, the same percentage you pay on income you earn from rentals. So, it's pretty easy to remember. So in that example I just gave, if you bought a house for €50,000, sold it for €70,000, and then had to pay a 24% tax on the €20,000 you made in profit, your total tax bill would be €4,800. So instead of making a profit of €20,000, you'd walk away with €15,200. Now, if you are a non-resident of Spain but are a resident of the EU, you only pay 19% capital gains tax, just the same rate as your rental income tax as well. Now, what I haven't covered today are taxes if you are a resident of Spain. Your EB and your rubbish tax would be the same, but I don't fully understand income tax and other resident tax details in Spain. So if you're considering becoming a resident of Spain and you need to take into account the full picture of resident taxes, I definitely recommend consulting a tax professional in Spain. Now, I know I've covered a lot of details, but let me just summarize this for you. If you're like me and you own a property in Spain as a non resident, every year you'll pay your EB tax, likely between August and October, your rubbish tax in April or May, and then you'll file your non resident tax once per year for the year prior, which would also include any rental income. And I'd recommend having an accountant file that one for you. If you own a car, you'll pay a road tax, usually paid between April and June. When you buy a house, you typically pay a 10% tax at the time of purchase, and when you sell a house, you pay between 19 and 24% on the capital gains, depending on if you are a resident of the EU or not. Hopefully that keeps it simple. I'd say I spend about 10 minutes every year dealing with my Spanish taxes, if that. With the EB and the rubbish tax being debited automatically, my accountant just sending me an email every year for the non-resident tax, and the direct debit option for my road tax as well, it's all pretty much automated and not difficult to navigate at all. If you have any thoughts or questions, I'd love to chat with you in the comments. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to join me every day, where travel and adventure build financial freedom. I can't wait to see where your dreams will take you.